So essentially, introduction to business is a simulation. And simulation served a tremendous purpose in business, in industry, in academia, in the military. They allow one to practice a series of operations without having to actually experience those operations. And as you can see, these are real world events. In our case, specifically, what we're being asked to do is we're being asked to understand the concept of managing. Now, what does it mean to be a manager? Well, essentially, managers monitor something. What is it that they monitor? Measures and metrics. You're driving your automobile, you're a manager. You're managing your automobile. What are you monitoring? You're monitoring the road, traffic lights, gas in your fuel tank, and so on. So as managers, what we do is we monitor a series of measures and metrics, and if necessary, we manage. That is, we make decisions. You look at your fuel tank on your dashboard, you see you're close to empty, your decision is, I'm going to go to a gas station. You may decide, well, can I go one more exit on the highway? That's a benefit analysis. So the key is, as managers, we monitor a series of measures and metrics, and then we manage based on what we are observing. All of these are within a series of milestones. Milestones are allowing us to be responsible. We have a fixed due date. We have to deliver our decisions by that date, and thus we'll be held accountable. So it's very easy to understand the concept of management. Just think of M&Ms, monitoring, managing, measures and metrics. Now, in our simulation is very straightforward and very simple concept. We have a market. We have many of them, in fact, 5 of them. We have a market. Now, what is a market? From your experiences and from the material you will be covering in your class, a market is made up of the number of customers we call a population. Those customers have a need, have a desire, have a requirement of what it is they're interested in purchasing in that market. This we call the attributes. And how closely our product meets those attributes is what we call the value proposition. Now, by the way, if some of these terms are not familiar to you, we do have a glossary of terms on the website under the training page. So I advise you to look at that also. In addition to the population and the attributes / value proposition of a market, we also have a desired price point. So if I'm in the markets to buy, for example, a Corvette, I have a specific price point in mind. If I'm in the market to buy a small SUV, I have a specific price point in mind. So a market not only has population, attributes of the products within it, desired price by the customers, it also has competitors. Each and every one of you in this simulation, your professor is elected to not have teams, which normally are not the case, which normally are not appropriate in introduction to business. So therefore, each and every one of you is a competitor to each and every other individual in your class. Now, what you can see is you as a company have a product that has a series of features, as you can see in this case here. These series of features are essentially the value proposition, the price, and the cost. The price and the cost give us something that's very important in business called a gross margin. How much money are we making on the sale of each and every one of our units, less inventory? So when you create a product to meet the needs, if you will, of the markets that you're going to be pursuing, you need to understand what is going to be the value proposition. You need to also understand what is your price and what is the cost of your item. In addition to that, the market doesn't know who you are. So therefore, what you need to do is you need to promote your product in the market so the market becomes aware of your product. Once they become aware of your product, they then need to be able to purchase that product. And so promotions is a very important aspect in any managerial decision set. And then we lastly have inventory in terms of managerial decisions. The problem with inventory is if we don't sell all our inventory at the end of a period, we have it for the next period, and it may not be viable in that next period. So we try to minimize the extent of excess inventory we have. And then lastly, what we have is we have in our feature, in our software, decisions associated with human resources. Every company is made up of people, human capital. And the idea is to develop a sense of loyalty, develop a sense of company ownership of the capital, the human capital. So you as a manager are going to monitor the population, the attributes, the desired price, and the competitors. And then you're going to act based on, if you will, the product features you have elected to create in your simulation. So when we look at all of that, this is really what the sim is all about. And we're going to go through the steps. Now, as I said, on the website for Introduction to Business, under student training, are a whole series of videos that you should look at. And these videos go into detail. They talk about strategy. They talk about the concepts behind it, the understanding of the value proposition, and so on. And so as we continue through this, here are some of the benefits that we have associated with simulations. First and foremost, they allow you to practice what you are learning without having to have any of the risk associated with those efforts. So if your decisions are poor, they're not going to hurt you economically, financially. Your reputation is not going to be harmed. Your brand is not going to be damaged. So the beauty behind simulations are they allow faculty such as Dr. Laskowski to employ in their class to give you an opportunity to practice what he is teaching you. And as you can see, you'll see all of this information on there rather than go through it line by line. But basically, it gives you a sandbox. And the sandbox allows you to experiment. And we have 4 quarters in which we are able to experiment in our simulation. Here are some of the concepts that are emulated, if you will, in the simulation itself. In marketing, we talk about the 4 Ps: price, product, placement, and promotion. I like to talk about the 7 Ps, which also include packaging and projections. So, and forecasting your products. The value proposition, something I call EVAC, effort, value, acceptance, and cost. And these are items that, again, are discussed in the glossary of terms, if you're not familiar with some of the terminology, and they will eventually be discussed in your class as we go through. Market niches, projecting, pricing strategy, the knowledge chain, which talks about the collection of data, then acting upon that data and having actionable knowledge, and so on as we go through it. Cash flow, extremely important in all businesses, as in one's personal life. Cash is king, and we need to make sure we understand that. And lastly, the concept of monitoring a set of measure and metrics to manage. So these are the various topics scattered throughout your program over this semester that you're going to be discussing, that you're reading in your Cengage material that Dr. Laskowski is discussing with you in your classes as we go through it. And here's a sort of a bulletized list, and all of you have a PDF of this, so you can go back in and you can review any one of these features and capabilities. What is exactly the process you're going to follow on a quarterly basis? Well, it's really simple. There are 4 steps to it. The first step is you're going to perform due diligence. Due diligence is the act of analyzing the information. Due diligence is the act of looking at the measures and metrics and ascertaining, is there something that needs to be done? Is there something that needs to change? And if so, that becomes a managing component. You then come in and you're going to look at your product and markets. You're going to be able to redesign your product. You're going to be able to reselect the markets that you're selling into, depending upon what analysis you performed during the due diligence. Then you're going to go into marketing. Marketing is going to allow you to decide how much in dollars to spend promoting your product in the various markets you've selected. What is the selling price of the product you have created? And how many units do you need to order based on your sales forecasting? And then lastly, once you're done with all of these decisions, you're going to look at your pro forma cash flow and determine, do you have sufficient capital to run your business? Or do you need to go to outside sources like commercial banks and borrow money? Or do you need to sell stock, ownership, if you will, in your corporation? So these are the processes you're going to perform on a quarterly basis. There are 4 quarters in the simulation. So the first quarter, due diligence, product, market, marketing, cash flow. Second quarter, due diligence, product, marketing, cash flow, HR. Third quarter, the same. Fourth quarter, the same. So this is your flow, and this is your process. And at the end of each quarter, the simulation is processed, and information, the competitive interactions are analyzed, and your position in the industry is illustrated. And that's what you're performing your due diligence on, those results at the end of that quarter. On your main screen, if you go to your main screen, once you log in, so you log in after you've created your account under student login, you're immediately brought to your main screen. And on your main screen, there are 3 major elements to that screen. The first one is showing you the quarterly due dates. These are the milestones. These are the dates your decisions must be entered by midnight on that date. Now, you can enter all your decisions 3 days ahead. You can enter all your decisions 2 hours ahead. It is up to you. You are the manager. You are making those decisions. However, it is your responsibility to make sure all the decisions are entered by that time period, because the simulation will be processed. And once it's processed, you cannot go back in and change decisions for a prior quarter, nor can you make them. It is an interactive element. And so just like tomorrow is going to be February 9th, we can't go back and say, can we make it February 8th? There is no going back. There is no going back in industry. We end up with where we are. That is where we are. We can't reset, drop a course as you do in academia and take it again next semester. Industry does not work that way. So one of the most important aspects is responsibility in managing your milestones. The second area of your screen shows 2 components, growth and gap. And so the growth shows really, once you get into quarter 2, 3, and 4, how well you're doing in terms of cash, gross margin, for example, inventory management, and so forth. It also shows you gaps, and gaps are very important, where you may be interested in repositioning your product in a less competitive market. And so you will talk about markets in your class. You'll talk about pure competitive markets, niche markets, oligopolies, for example, or concentrated markets, duopolies, and so on. The key is your objective as a manager is to position your product in a market that has the least competition and will allow you to effectively generate the greatest revenue and gross margin. So the next 2 components of your main screen are where you perform your major due diligence. Now, you also have an export capability that allows you to export the data into an Excel spreadsheet, where you can perform all sorts of analyses if you wish. But basically, the idea is to look at this information and to analyze how well your company is growing, and are there opportunities for you to pursue a more accelerated growth path. Looking at that, once you've made that due diligence, once you've done that analysis, if you will, you then come into your product screen. Now, your product screen is very simple. Your product screen will show you up to 20 different product features. The features you have selected to create your product are indicated by the check boxes that you've checked. So you have elected to check item, 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 and item. Now, what is it that you're selecting? You're selecting, in this case, this is a vertical description, and you have a generic one, which means you don't have any actual capabilities or features. You have feature 1, 2, 3, and so on. Now, what is it that each feature has? It has a cost and it has a suggested retail. That difference is giving you the gross margin. In addition to that, you also see the value of that feature, that is the need it's satisfying in a specific market. The value proposition in the simulation ranges from 0 to 7. Since you can have up to 5 products, the maximum value proposition of your product is 35. Now, in this case here, what we can see is this first item, this first line, which is called COBOL in our example, has a value of 7 in this market and a value of 0 in this market. What does 0 mean? 0 means it is of no interest to the customer in that particular market. So when you are creating your products, what you need to look at is you need to look at the markets you wish to pursue, and you can pursue up to 3 markets and select up to 5 products that will maximize the value proposition in your primary market and in your secondary markets. And you select the markets that you are going to sell into by doing and using the checkbox again. So as you can see, in this case, this market has been selected, this one has been, and this one. And then you get to see your results. Let's get a bigger screenshot. Here are what the results look like. The results at the bottom of the screen show you the population of the markets you've selected. So you now have an understanding of the potential customer base. It shows you the value proposition of the product in that particular market. So for example, what we can see here is that this product has a value proposition of 33. That means it's extremely high. In this market, it has a value proposition of 30 in the next one, which is extremely high there. So your objectives then are to essentially maximize your product. Now, how do you do that? You do that simply by designing your product, selecting features up to 5, determining the value proposition in the markets you have targeted, and then once you're satisfied with that, you then need to proceed to the next step in the process, and that is namely marketing. So you're going to design your product. Now, again, I'm going over this quickly, but you do have under student training many different videos, all describing it similarly with different approaches, the discussion of strategy and recommendations that you should follow. So each and every one should look at those videos prior to making any decisions in the simulation. Once you're done and you're happy and you see no other change that need to be made, then you proceed to your marketing screen. And so once we get to the marketing screen, we now are looking at, in this case here, what and how should we promote the product? Well, we are promoting the product by creating, if you will, an advertising campaign. An advertising campaign is made up of 3 advertising mediums. In your simulation, it uses generic classifications: ad plan 1, ad plan 2, 3, 4, and so on. Now, what does an ad plan mean? Well, an ad plan means let's add something intelligent to that ad plan. Let's assume the ad plan was social media on the internet. Well, social media may be very good for a consumer-based product, but social media may not be very good for a business-based product. Now, how do we determine the effectiveness of that media? Well, we look at an effectiveness rating. And if you'll notice, an effectiveness rating is a number, again, from 0 to 7. 0 means no matter how much I advertise that product in that market, it's not going to bring me any customers. On the other hand, a 7 says it is a highly effective medium. So again, I'm interested in selling sports cars. I'm more than likely going to advertise in some type of automobile magazine. Which type of automobile? Should I advertise in ones that are for commercial use, like trucks, or should I advertise in ones that are more for recreational? Well, probably the recreational magazine will have a higher effectiveness. So since you can select up to 3, again, by using checkboxes of the ad plans, what you need to do is try to maximize your ad plan or ad campaign effectiveness in the primary market. Remember, you've selected up to 3 markets. And so you're not going to be able to have absolute effectiveness in all 3 markets. So you need to decide which is your primary, and that can be based on population, can be based on, if you notice in this case here, what is the industry average for the value proposition compared to yours. If yours is higher than the industry average, then that means your product should theoretically sell much better than one where it's slower, and so on. Once you have selected and created your ad campaign by using these checkboxes, you then come down to your next step as to how much do you wish to spend to promote these products. And so remember, customers need to be made aware of your product. And to be made aware of your product, you need to advertise. You need to promote. And so how much you spend promoting will increase the awareness of your product to that particular market. Then you decide, based on the competitors that are in the market, based on the effectiveness of your ad campaign, based on the population size, what selling price, and how many units do you need to order to fulfill your sales projections. And so this represents your marketing, and this represents the elements, the pricing strategy and the projection strategy associated with your marketing campaigns. Once you're done, you then go to the final step, and the final step is to look at your pro forma cash flow. And in that pro forma cash flow, ascertain, do you have sufficient capital to run your business? Now, the pro forma cash flow is relatively accurate, except for the one element here, if you notice with a star, called revenue projections. Revenue projections are merely your expectations. Will you sell that many units? Probably not. Will you sell more? More than likely not. Will you sell less? Possibly. So the problem with the pro forma cash flow is that it incorporates the projections, the projected revenues. So when you discuss pro forma income statements and pro forma balance sheet and pro forma cash flows, this is what it really is implying, that the revenues, which is the uncertainty in those financial numbers, may impact you. If you have determined that you are concerned about your projection, then you need to go to sources of capital. And as you can see, you have a number. You can borrow from a commercial bank, you can borrow from family, you can borrow cash from your personal bank account, invest, if you will, into the company, and so on. In addition to that, you can also sell stock, which shows, and in this case here, it shows the ownership of how much has been sold. Remember, when you sell stock, you're diluting your ownership of your business. So the idea is you only reluctantly employ sources of cash if you ascertain you do not have sufficient revenues and are not confident in those revenues, and therefore you want to have a level of, if you will, conservative balance in your bank account so you can meet all of your bills. So those really are the 4 steps that we're dealing with in the simulation. And as you can see, again, on Brightspace, this information has been loaded. The first quarter is on the 12th, the 13th, the 14th, and the 15th. And then we run an assessment at the end of the semester as well. So what you do is you product design, marketing decisions, cash flow management, quarter gets processed, you do it again and again based on these milestones. Very quickly, just coming back, taking, whoops. This is part of your recording screen, so we'll just skip that. We don't need to listen to it. And so on. Again, I'm just reviewing the screens for you in this manner. And as you can see, these are the various screens coming from your, and this is your checklist. You review the growth, the gap tables on your main screen. You go to your product design, go to your marketing page, go to your cash flow. Those are the steps in your process. And once you go to the training, student training site, you're going to see, notice it's scrolling through on the right-hand side. All of these videos are there to help you become familiar with the simulation itself. And so if you have not already done so, I strongly recommend that you start reviewing. Some of the videos are 2 minutes long, others are 15 minutes long. Review them, look at the user guide, look at the glossary of terms, review, if you will, the checklist. These are all there to provide you with an opportunity to become familiar with the simulation, become familiar with the interface, and the decisions that you're going to need to make so that you can succeed in using the software. Let me just stop and so forth.